Hello and welcome to another episode of Minnesota Liberty. I am one of your hosts, Rebecca Whiting, and I have with me today TJ Hawthorne. Well, and actually, you're here most days, so I don't know why I said today. You're kind of a consistent part of this. So, anyways, podcast is sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. If you're interested in joining the party, finding out more information, or just donating towards the cause, lpmn.org is our website. You can find out a lot more information there. So today we had a plan, and the plan was kind of like, boop, last minute. So we're kind of scrambling and coming up with a new plan. So this is actually plan B. But needed a topic, and we were like, let's talk about immigration, because that seems to be in the news a lot lately with all the deportations and
all the differences I like to see and observe everyone's hard take on a lot of this stuff. They think they've got it all figured out, and this is what has to happen. You don't have rights unless you're this, or you do have rights unless you're this, or everyone has rights unless you're this. You know, it's very interesting to listen to everyone's take on it. I definitely have my own take on it, and I know you do as well. We're very similar, I think, if we're not pretty aligned on this issue. And then I think a lot of folks have to take into account, that where you're at, where the everyday life that you live in, where you live, you can still have your opinions no matter what, sure, and you can have experiences and see things in different areas, but your everyday life, living in Tucson rather than living in St. Paul is quite different. And I'm sure a lot of folks have different extremes of that opinion depending on where you live. So I like to think about all these things when I think about what would I do as a legislator. How would I vote, or how would I try to introduce legislation that would be fair? As America being the whole country of immigrants, that's how the American experiment started, pretty much. This is this newfound land, or so we were told, kind of stuff. Of course, we can talk about that as well, right?
Yes. I don't know. Maybe we start there, start at the beginning. So, I grew up in the public education system, and I'm assuming you did too, public education system. And so what did you, when we talked about, the new land and Christopher Columbus and all of that kind of stuff in the beginning, how was that taught to you?
Yeah, that we landed on Plymouth Rock, and really realizing that Columbus had nothing really to do with America. Just the fact that I don't even know what the facts are, really, I'll be honest. What I've been taught was he discovered America in 1492. That was one of the dates that I do remembering dates, or as far as years. And then I remember Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims, and having Thanksgiving with the Indians. And yes, there were savages, and some things happened. I guess I went to grade school in Oklahoma, and there were, quite a Cherokee type, or, indigenous population going on down there in Oklahoma, where I guess maybe I got, I don't know, a pretty good perspective when I was younger about that kind of stuff.
So Columbus didn't actually land on mainland America.
Right, so right.
Yeah, some island out in the, Atlantic Ocean. Didn't realize he had discovered something. And I don't say discovered, like the Europeans, at least for a long time, the Europeans hadn't had an influence in this hemisphere. But I had a teacher growing up that taught us about, the Vikings having landed, Native Americans. She was all about traveling and kind of, history and that kind of stuff. And so that's, anyways. So who is it? Amerigo Vespucci? Was he Italian? Do you remember that part of? That's the one that realized, oh, this isn't actually India. This isn't, part of part of the world that was a different continent completely. Anyways, so and then Native Americans. So technically, all of us are at some point have immigration in our background, right?
Any white folks, I'd assume, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's immigration again, like you said, the Vikings, this was another history that definitely just recently in the last 10, 15 years, maybe I've learned about how early the Vikings have been in North America and who knows how far down in South America and things like that, where they could have. And then even in the last couple years, talking about history, right? So I guess where we want to talk about immigration, it is nice to have some basis of whose land is it, right? I mean, but then again, you ultimately get to a conclusion where it's like, well, we're here right now. Here we are right now. And,
I think that would have to be the conclusion that I would. It's the land of the people who are standing on it at the moment. Like we want to keep peace. There's peace and laws and things like that keep people from stealing your land. But that those of us that exist right now, we didn't engage in those things. Even if our ancestors did, we're not guilty for things that they did wrong, right? So, and there was, I think, there was a lot of, in American history, there's a lot of conflict. And in all, not just American history, but human history, there's a lot of conflict between groups. And that fighting and wars have always existed. And so we aren't immune to that. But the land today is who is here at the moment. And so that's us. So
yeah, and I like to think about too, recently reading a little bit more about libertarianism and private property rights and things like that, where these borders can be pretty darn arbitrary when you're talking statehood and state crap. But if it's my property, well, that border is not very arbitrary anymore. And then it comes to, it's like, well, where are we sitting right now? Okay, are we in my property? Or then you talk about public property and all that crap, how much, what we want to believe into that. And so, but like if you go to like where folks are standing right now, well, there's tens of millions of non-Americans that have been pouring into this country in the last 4 years that have created a disruption, however it be.
Actually is. I don't know if they even have a way.
Really know. I don't want to put money on that number that I said for sure. That's a good number that I think is believable. I think it's been quite an open sore just of who knows. Again, the impact isn't always negative. And matter of fact, I would say the impact of that many people is a positive thing. There's just, once you self-fulfill this prophecy of these people bad, okay, it's going to be really hard for those people to have it good or to create good when they're constantly looking over the shoulders or things like that. Well, then it's hard to produce good when it's like that. And so that's where I sympathize with a lot of libertarians that are the open borders. And, logically it does make a lot more sense when you talk about human action and things like that. But then again, you have to also recognize private property rights at that same time. So that's where I think it figures itself out. But our government doesn't operate that way. There is too much of this public property and too much of this other crap.
I think that first, one of the first questions that I think is important when talking about this is that where do our rights originate? Do our rights as a person originate from the government, or do they originate from a higher power? And if you read the Constitution and our rights and the way they're laid out, it's clear that that they're just being written down, that those rights originate from a higher power. And so we get those simply by being human and alive, you know, not because we're American, but because we're human. So when it comes to, for me, when it comes to the border debate, I like to first keep a few things in perspective. Um, one, that the way that I choose to operate towards other people is with, you know, kindness and compassion first. I don't think it's necessarily because everybody deserves that, because there are awful people that don't deserve being treated fairly, if they've, you know, made bad choices. But that the reason that I would do that isn't a reflection of their deserving that, but of a reflection of who I am as a person. So that's the way, that's one of the first layers of this. The second layer of this is that anytime the government, the federal government, decides that they are going to regulate something and have authority over it, very often we find that things will run inefficiently and they'll be ineffective. The wait times are going to be longer. The paperwork trail. I mean, well, you were in the military. You remember like trying to keep up with the paperwork, you know, like it's just there's so much and it's complicated. It doesn't make sense. It's not self-explanatory. I mean, think of like your taxes, but in a much bigger scale. Like it's a mess, right? And then you give something like that to, you know, the immigration system and say, hey, we want you to manage helping people become US citizens, when there should be a clear path to being able to become a US citizen. If somebody was born and started out in another country, they want to become part of the United States, which I think is very fair, going through the immigration and becoming a citizen of the United States, that we should allow that, right? Not
it's
criminals.
absolutely necessary.
Yeah, not especially not violent criminals. There should be a vetting process, because, you know, we also have a responsibility to ensuring the you know, the laws that we have in the United States, not only are they good laws, but the laws that we have are followed. And so people who have a background of you know, I don't know, uh, stealing things or being generally violent, I would
Track
say,
record, rap sheet, you're saying?
yeah, I mean, just, you are going to be less welcome if you go into somebody's house acting like that kind of a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that we also have an immigration that is so complicated and so overly burdened that it makes the VA system look easy to navigate, right? I don't know, is this common in the Navy? Because I was in the Army and you were in the Navy. Did guys in the Navy go overseas and then marry foreign women and, you know, bring them back? Did that happen a lot in the where?
Oh
around,
yeah, you don't. I mean, you don't know any old salty sailors that don't have a Filipino
right?
wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to assume things, but I was stationed in South Korea, and a lot of the guys that were stationed in South Korea came home with Korean or Filipino wives. And then they get this eye-opening experience trying to navigate the immigration system to help the women that they've already married, and in some cases are going to have their babies, you know what I mean? But now they have to navigate helping them green cards, stay in the United States legally, and then on that track to being a US citizen. Well, I remember going with a friend, and actually this wasn't, it was a fellow female soldier, but she had spent some time in, it was Southern American country, doing missions work prior to joining the Army, and then married somebody, and I can't remember what country this was. This was like 25 years ago this happened. Anyways, but I remember going with her to these, you know, legal meetings that she had, because she had And she was spending thousands of dollars on lawyers trying to get her husband to the United States from whatever South American country she was from. Thousands of dollars. And that's like only the beginning. That's kind of just scratching the surface. There are people that have, for whatever reason, they spend 10, 15 plus years trying to become American citizens.
Well,
and
I think
that's just,
it's
a disaster.
This is absolutely a product of democracy. This type of bureaucracy right here is first. We need jobs. We got to create jobs. We have more of this filter to then, but it's also the big thing is this is one of the biggest arguing talking points politically for years, right? This is the stuff like abortion and immigration and I don't know if I think war is actually beginning to be on a good side of the people, but what I'm saying is that topic of discussion where you have to be on either one major side or the other, and so politically it's very lucrative, so that we have more bureaucratic jobs to do all this stuff, and that's where it gums up all this process. Just like we were saying, the VA is this exact same thing. It's a great example also of everybody's got to argue who the heck, everybody's got to take care of these veterans, and you got to spend the money, and we know what happens when you spend bureaucratic.
Yeah, but then that forces people into a system that is just such an awful experience to try and navigate.
I agree. Oh, I know. But that's kind of that's the product of the democracy.
Bureaucracy. It's the product of bureaucracy.
Well, the bureaucracy is the product of. I mean, I really believe that the democracy is the God that failed. That is a really good. It just says this. I wish I could articulate it better, right? Well, the way it was written, where it's just the result, right? It's totally the product. This and this happening, and you're going to get this because the incentives are all there to keep feeding that monster, keep licking that ice cream cone, and to continue to breed this bureaucracy through the democracy. And again, like the democracy is the talking points. Here's immigration. Let's fight. When all the while, the real answer is these are good people. They need to be in our country, and they get to get here, and then they get a carrot with attached to a stick at the end, and then pay thousands more dollars and keep filling out all this paperwork until you finally get your carrot at the end of the stick. And
if you get it at all. I mean, really, that's what it comes to. If you get it at all, because the immigration system, the way it's designed, and I think this is intentional, because like you were saying, with the current state of the political system, how it exists, because it's a two-party system, like the two major parties back and forth. On one side, you have let them all in, and on the other side, you have keep them all out. And so there's just this tug and war and back and forth. And you know what never gets talked about ever is the difficulties of normal, peaceful people that would like to go through this in the right steps and do this the right legal way, but that our system is so awful on navigating that it almost pushes people into be to be
go
here
illegally.
Because the amount of money that it takes to get the lawyers, and the time spent, and in the meantime, people, especially people who maybe have come here as refugees or have maybe just walked across the border, like Mexico. A lot of the people that are leaving in Southern America are coming here with nothing. And then, well, So there's
Well, it's
got
the
to be.
land of opportunity, and it really still is, even as much as so many Americans believe America sucks relative to 98% of the rest of the world. This still is the land of opportunity where you could come here with nothing, as long as you don't get a parking ticket or honestly, most of these folks probably are very peaceful and are staying under the radar. But once they want to start earning legitimately, then yes, then Doge will catch them up, or whoever will, ICE will snatch them up, man. They're going to, already have a family established for 10, 15 years and running a restaurant. But then, so this it's a touchy subject when you really get down to it, where maybe it's, where I see it, the violent folks need to be able to just go, and we're not obligated to bring them back to any country. I think wherever you came in, although how are we going to know that? How are they going to, everyone, also deserves some kind of due process to an extent, right? So definitely not, some of the videos that you've seen recently this week of a woman getting snatched up by dudes in plain clothes. And not until after they got her grabbed where I see them pulling their badges out of their necklace crap. And it's like, that looked a little too Stasi for me. And I know that one was quite blown up, but
and here's the thing. So there's a couple of different stories, or I would say not specific stories, but a different couple types of stories that are coming out. And you can, just go in social media. This is all over my news feed in different, areas, but there are, obviously there are ISIS cracking down on people that don't have their papers in order, and so we kind of already talked about how difficult the system is to navigate to even get those papers in order. That's a separate issue. The other thing that ICE is cracking down on is people who do have a rap sheet. They've got legal trouble. They came here, they got in trouble. They're cracking down on that. But there are a couple of other scenarios that I find troubling. Scenario A is the people, and I think a lot of this tends to be younger, maybe younger 20s age, college kids, that kind of stuff, that are protesting the US involvement in Israel and Gaza and are getting scooped up as being pro Hamas. And I think that it's really easy for people who don't like to think in things deeply and don't like nuance and don't want to pick up and have that, that deep and intellectual conversation, that just because that you oppose what's happening in Gaza doesn't make you pro Hamas. And so I worry, because when I've seen some of this happen, that there's a very fine line. And who gets to decide this? Oh, well, what you said is pro Hamas, when the bent is defaults to leaning towards, well, if you complain about what is, or if you protest about what's happening in Gaza right now, that you're not protesting because of the violence on normal people. You're protesting because you're pro Hamas. Who gets to decide that? What language is acceptable and what language is not acceptable? And then decide, these are people that are being deported out of the country without due process.
Yeah.
That were here, who did have their papers in order, and now somebody somewhere has decided that it's not okay, and now we're just going to get rid of people because of what they're saying, and they disagree. I don't care if somebody says, oh, well, I can kind of see Hamas's side to this. I'm not saying I think that. So I want to be very clear, like hypothetically, I don't care if somebody's like, well, Hamas might have a point right here. But that doesn't, that speech is protected from our First Amendments. And being in the United States, you have First Amendment rights to be able to say whatever it is that you want to say, and words aren't violence. This is just saying something that's like, well, I'm not sure I disagree with everything they're doing, doesn't make you a violent person. It also doesn't make you guilty of things that Hamas is doing. And this is just an example.
Well, yeah, no, you're nailing it. And I remember last week what happened when we started talking about our greatest ally. I got cut off, but I I think it's pretty obvious. There's controlling, and actually, this was just something pretty dumb that just happened in a Senate committee hearing. Was a rabbi that came in and said on the campuses and protests, you can't just be. And I've heard this 3 times now from Dave Smith and Nate Thurston talking about Joe Jorgensen. This was a take right out of Joe Jorgensen's playbook when the rabbi said, you can't just be anti-Semitic or anti
have to be actively
anti-Semitic. And it was like, this guy really said that in front of the United States. Like this.
What does that even look like? Like, literally, what does it like? And that was back to the, you can't.
Who's the arbiter?
Against racism, you have to be actively anti-racist. What in the world does that mean?
Right.
Like, you got a definition for that? What does that look like as you are living it out during the day? Like that. Anyways, total side note. So the other scenario that I see happening beyond, and as if like people getting snatched up utilizing their free speech wasn't concerning enough, but that anytime you make a blanket statement against a group of people, you're always going to run the risk of wrapping up in that innocent people who had absolutely nothing to do with the issue and are just going to kind of get swept along with things who don't deserve it, right? So I have a story. I wasn't going to put it up on the screen, but okay, so this story was Los Angeles, came out of Orange County, California. This is what it says. They paid taxes, they raised 3 daughters, they never missed a check-in. After 35 years in Southern California, Gladys and Nelson Gonzalez were handcuffed and deported to Colombia, ripped from the only home their American-born family has ever known. They fled violence in Colombia in 1989 and spent decades trying to do everything right, working, checking in with ICE, applying for legal status, building a life in whatever this, it's Spanish, and I'm going to butcher that. Oh, shoot, I just closed it. Oh, last month during a routine appointment they'd done countless times before, they were arrested on the spot. No warning, no chance to say goodbye, just cuffs, chains, and silence. Their daughters, Jessica, Stephanie, and Gabby, are still here. So is their grandson. But the Gonzalez family is now split across 2 countries because a broken immigration system made no room for grace. And I think that's anytime that there is, you involve the bureaucracy in a system, that's what happens. You can't, people, they just have like these boxes they have to check, and they almost, through the paperwork, they lose their humanity.
There you go.
And
That's
no room. Yeah, there's no room for somebody to be like, well, but who can I talk to about this? Can they just talk to me about this?
No, not my job.
There's some pencil pusher sitting behind a desk that's just like, nope, I'm sorry. Not even like, nope, this is you. You go this way, you go this way. I actually, did you ever watch the TV show Loki on Disney Plus?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the very first episode where he's getting like sucked in and he goes through like do you remember that?
Where he goes to the time police place? Yeah,
and he's just like, they're like, you got to go through the line and then you check in, and it's just so perfect. Maybe I don't know if I could find that and pull it up and play this, but because Loki gets sucked in and he's like, I'm a god of Asgard, and then he has to go through the bureaucracy,
just like everybody else,
the time travelers, and they stamp his paper and they're like, well, you did this, so that means psh, and anyways, and there's no room for grace. There's no room to talk to somebody. There's no room to ask for help. There's no room for somebody to be able to make a personal decision because of a set of circumstances that may not be covered in their data flow. Was it on the sheet? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh
And so
yeah.
then
No.
innocent people who are trying to do things right get wrapped up in this, and they're victimized for it. That's essentially what's happened.
Yeah, well, this goes back to, I think, what I was saying before about the jobs program crap in this bureaucracy where, okay, we want to hire this many people so that we look good on our numbers. Well, this person, we got to delegate down to the lowest level of, you ask one question and then this answer, that person goes this way on the flow chart, and this answer, and then that's literally. And then that person asks them a question, their brain starts smoking. I don't know. I was only told to ask this one question. You can't ask me anything more. You can't ask me to do anything more. Plus, they only pay them that much, right? So that's what they can also say is, they only pay me enough for this much, and so they don't know any better. So yes, Loki comes in. He's like, wait, who the hell do I talk to? Nope, this is the way you go. And then here's your crimes you're guilty of, and bam, you're banished from time forever. And that's kind of where folks, and then they want to just pass the buck. Nobody wants to have that responsibility. Nobody wants to have that talk.
Yeah, not my job. Not my job.
Yeah.
Just go do something else. Go to the next guy. Not my job. Oh, you need to go. Oh, and the VA system. I know but it's full of that too. Oh, this isn't my job. You need to go to this.
100% what that is. Totally passing the buck.
And these are things that the government does to help, but the bureaucracy is just so unmanageable that it is enough to drive somebody insane. And
yeah. Oh man, I would love to just let loose the state chains of all these different programs and let the free market do its job. And of course, there will be pain involved, but the end outcome.
While the market tries to right itself, I don't know. Every once in a while, I'm like, well, we need to try and have like a smooth transition. But when, the ship is just so off course and it has to do this immediate, and coming back, it would end up, I don't know how you have a smooth transition.
It's impossible. That can has been kicked so high up this hill that to get down that slippery slope, how many dang cliches I can have in one sentence, but that's literally how I feel about it. This can has been kicked so high up this hill. Just keep kicking the can, keep voting for less of two evil, we'll drop bombs over there so we don't drop them over here, and all this other stuff that folks justify.
Definitely the answer to all of our problems is more bureaucracy. That's how we fix this.
Throw more money at it. Yeah. Tax.
We'll just make a new government program that people have to sign up for and, drop it in the box.
Well, this actually kind of goes full circle to the open borders type argument with the libertarians. In my belief, here's how I see it, is that yes, more people is actually how we defeat the deficit and all the crap that we have, the debt, is by more people, more growth, and more innovation, more human action in our economy. And I truly believe that but great majority of those folks that came over this border illegally are kind people. Because I truly believe most people are kind people, and they just looking for a better tomorrow. And this is my chance, Right. And so I think there are very many nasty people that chose to come over here illegally. And yes, it's hard to argue with the right wingers that want to say they crossed the border illegally. They're criminals. When they say we only want to deport criminals. Well, they're all criminals. They came over illegally. Okay, all right, man.
There can't be a crime just by stepping over some arbitrary national line. And now on one side of it, you're just a person, and now on the other side, just by crossing that arbitrary line, you're a criminal. Just because you don't have your paperwork in order. I really dislike the terminology that's used to make people sound like that they're violent felons just because they stepped over a line in the sand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
trespass, I could kind of understand. Okay, there's because of I do believe in the private property rights where
yeah,
we can get rid of the state borders and hey, this is my property, and yes, you must have permission to be on my property. It's not like I'm going to take swift action.
yeah. So on the change topics here. Just a question for you. How do you feel about the government owning land?
I don't feel that's good at all. Like land for sure. There's a lot of federal property, BLM out west that could be opened up
Yeah,
and
and by
privatized.
BLM we mean Bureau of Land Management, not
Yes,
Black Lives Matter.
correct.
Two different groups. Yeah, so that I would be in agreement. I don't think that the federal government, especially not the federal government, should be able to own or hoard land. That I think that, although I do, this is where I'm conflicted, like national parks, things like Yellowstone, the places in our country that just have this amazing, nature. I like nature and outdoors and that kind of stuff. And having that available so that it can be accessible by everyone. But I still don't believe that the federal government should be able to own and hoard land. I think that in the case of, I don't know, what would be the free market solution for like a national park? What do you think? I don't actually have an answer
Well,
to
I
that.
I really believe, and I actually just had this discussion with someone I truly care about that is fairly status, and that's fine, right? It's this this is the thing where, man, as great as those national parks are, I could imagine them being run privately and being even greater, and um the beauty of a lot of that just comes naturally. So there's not much that has to be done, right? But um I don't know. I feel like having national parks is great. And I think enough folks with the right money that could purchase that property would love to keep that tradition going on. Right. But I don't think it's something that the government should be forcing to happen. I think would happen naturally. And maybe just a small percentage is chunked off here to profit and build a couple hotels or whatever. I don't know. I think I've seen plenty of federal land overseas that we definitely. I don't know how much of that the America owns or whatever if we're responsible for, but it's definitely not civilian land, and it's prime real estate for great civilian recreation. Instead, we use it for war machines. And I just think it's just weird that most of this great real estate that folks could be having fun and making great memories with their family, we got death machines sitting around and waiting to kill somebody. Anyways, that's my peace neck.
It's okay. It comes out. I think it's the state of Nevada. I'm going to Google this really fast. How
Yes,
much
it's like
land
90%.
does the federal land
70 to 90 or something. Nevada is federally owned. California has quite a bit as well.
80%. Nevada has the
80?
highest percentage of federal land, 80%, 56 million acres.
And granted, a lot of that is places that people probably don't want to be living anyways, but who's to say? Who's to say?
I don't feel like that there's, I mean, you can do a lot of things in the desert.
Yeah.
That area was cultivated and Native Americans lived there long before the American federal government was the way it is now. So,
hey man, climate change too. Who knows? That could be a whole different area in 10, 15 years. Or at least 20 years ago, we were told it was going to be happening by this time.
I'm not sure I'm ready to go into the climate change debate today.
No. Right.
That's
Well, we do have a question.
Oh,
we got 20 minutes, so an hour, but this is kind of a good question for what are thoughts on statewide Minnesota free school meal program? Well, I think I can answer already for you that we both believe in homeschools, or I believe in a free market type school. I'm wearing a public school sweatshirt right now. This is the public school that my wife is a teacher at. Um, I believe it's horrible. I think it's a first step into getting 3 years from now we're going to be serving them cardboard. You know what I mean? It's a socialist type program that is only bound to fail. So
Well,
that's my
okay, so I have kids, and like, I mean, and I guess I've worked in charities and kind of missions kinds of groups before, where we intentionally helped, like, I don't know what the term would be, the proper term would be now, but like underprivileged maybe, or people that just don't have a lot to be able to provide for themselves, and helped provide meals.
yeah.
And I would say that we have a lot of unfunded mandates in Minnesota that are really putting a huge strain on the public schools. And I get the idea behind it. People want kids to go to school and not be hungry. I understand that. But there's got to be a better way than just telling the schools, well, you have to provide everybody a free meal, without giving them any way to be able to fund those free meals at the schools. And that Minnesota's kind of bad about doing this with unfunded mandates for public schools, because there's a lot of things that they do, like kids who need or special needs, or need extra help in the schools. The state government said, well, you have to provide that, while also not giving them a financial way to be able to provide that, meet those needs. And school buses is another one. Schools have to provide transportation for every kid in their district to be able to get to school, but while also not helping the schools. So if the state's gonna say, hey, you have to have a public school, you have to do this, you have to do that, but then they don't give them the financial means to make it happen. This is why we see so many schools across the state that are literally millions and millions of dollars in the red and under budget, or over budget, because of these unfunded mandates. And so while I understand, trying to keep kids fed, that's important, but there's got to be a better way of doing it than asking for the state to manage it and the schools to fund it, without having a way to do that outside of tax dollars. You know what I mean?
Sure. No, I love that perspective for sure. I do absolutely understand that there are needy folks. Yeah, I mean I volunteer at my food shelf. I just got back from the board meeting, and it's really interesting to see how many families are fed, for free from our food shelf, and the numbers on that. And um but I what I see is as the end result, just like you said, yes, here's the mandate. So if you must produce it, and then all of a sudden here's your budget, and then here's your budget, and then here's your budget as it goes down, or as money becomes worth less, and then you're gonna end up making deals with Cisco to have 10,000 pounds box full of chicken or whatever, and the stuff is already unhealthy, right? That's the one of the big things. And my concern is the healthy choices that are going to be there with this mandate come 1 or 2 years. Your point is even great. Makes a lot more sense when you talk about these unfunded mandates. This is just adding to the tally.
So one of the things that the Bemidji schools did a while back, and it didn't really work out because this was going to take time to put into place, and there wasn't there I don't think there was a big enough push for infrastructure at the time. But maybe if the right people came together, it's a good idea. Somebody should pull it together and make it happen. but was utilizing local farmers to be able to grow food, literally growing food for the school districts. And the problem that we have this far north is that, we have such a short growing season. So you would have to grow things that had a nice shelf life and that you could store to be able to use periodically through the Persephone period, and when it was too cold outside. Or another idea is, if we are going to have public schools, having putting into the public school system, maybe at the high school level or middle school could do this too. There's some elementary schools that have done this to some degree here, and I'm guessing other schools have kind of played around with this little bit, but literally like having an agriculture program where they are growing their own food, and having students participate in that growing, and then using that food that they grow to supplement what they have coming in for the schools. So that's an idea that does take a lot of work, because growing food is not an easy thing. It's a lot of
especially if you got the students, you have the incentive for the students. Yeah, it's almost nothing unless they want to do it, unless they see the value in it in themselves, or they're just motivated to be interested in that stuff. What you're saying is growing is tough, you know what I mean? And you got rookies doing it.
Well, growing's tough even for people who are not rookies.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it would be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and there would have to be some sort of I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I always thought that would be a fun idea
I dig it
in the public school system to make them more sustainable. Yeah. And to kind of help with kids that are investing their time and are producing something. There's a lot of positive benefit for that, for the students or the people that are doing it. It feels really good to produce something for yourself. So I don't know if that's a solution, but I know that just saying like, well, the government is the solution to making sure that everybody's fed, is long-term is just unsustainable. There has to be, because then it goes back to that bureaucracy too, is that any time that the government takes over something, they're going to make that system as complicated as possible. And we're trying to simplify it, not complicate it. And we're trying to make it so that it does have long-term viability, without breaking apart the system because of its existence. So that's just where I stand on those kinds of things. Not saying that I'm gonna like take we're gonna make it so that none of the kids could eat. No, that's not.
Well, that's what goes back to that fine line discussion of you got to be on one side or the other. It's like, well, yes, I want the dang kids to eat, because the argument is, oh, you just want the kids to starve. It's like, seriously? And that's where, no, you're pro Hamas. No, I just want kids to stop dying in Gaza. Oh, you're this. No, I just want this. It's pretty simple.
Right.
Well, hey, maybe if we begin to wrap up, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on this weekend.
Yeah. So we had some movement today, in fact, and I'm kind of excited to talk about this on Defend the Guard. There's a couple of really big things that are happening. We were, what? I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this up there, because we haven't harassed enough politicians today. That is what we do. So the Defend the Guard legislation, for anybody that's tuning in for the first time, you've never heard of it. Defend the Guard legislation, all it does, and this is a bill that we support, all it does is say that the National Guard in Minnesota could only be used in overseas combat situations with a formal declaration of war from Congress, like the U.S. Constitution already requires, right? But that's not, since World War II, there has been no formal declaration of war, despite how many literal wars we've had troops involved in. Korea, Vietnam, everything during the Reagan administration, First Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia. None of those ever had a formal declaration of war. This legislation would require that Congress go through the proper steps in declaring war before the Minnesota National Guard could be used in combat, which would, I mean, it's a risk to their lives, right? Minnesota is not the only state that's going through this. There are many other states across the country that have Defend the Guard legislation to some degree going through the process through their House and Senate. Today in Minnesota, we have a bill in the House and the bill in the Senate with authors and co-authors. And at least in the Senate's case, we have not just Republican authors, but we also have Democrat authors on this bill. And so that's kind of huge, having bipartisan support in our Senate for a bill of this caliber. This is the kind of legislation that really would turn the war machine, the military industrial complex, the defense industry on its head and help prevent things like Iraq and Afghanistan that were just such a disaster for future militaries, right? For our future military. We had been enough of an irritant that Representative Matt Bliss, who is my representative, he's also the chair of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. He gave us, I went to a public hearing. If he's watching this or his people are, tell him I said hi. I know that what we say about him during our podcast gets back to him. So tell him I said hi. Anyways, went to a public hearing, meet and greet kind of a thing, and got a little bit, it was a little bit spicy for a bit, asking him, in this meet and greet about the Defend the Guard legislation. And he is of the opinion that the legislation is unconstitutional because he claims that there's all these things, but it's complete ignorance on his part. And it's, I'm not sure I would call it malfeasance necessarily at this point, but he has been presented with all the correct information. And if he continues insisting that this legislation is unconstitutional, then it is malfeasance because he has all the facts. And so today we met with him and Representative Bedell Duran, who's also up north here, Representative Bjorn Olson, who is actually serving currently in the National Guard as an officer, and also serving on the Veterans Committee. I'm not sure if that's a conflict of interest. Maybe the viewers.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that, and so they were on this call and met with us and Diego Rivera, who is part of the national team trying to help get this Defend the Guard legislation across all the states, right? And I mean, really just broke down Diego did. He was amazing. Broke down all of their opposition to this legislation in a way that, like we're all listening and hearing it. So I felt like that Representative Bliss gave us this meeting, was like, hey, we're just going to talk about it just so that he could say, well, I tried, but you didn't convince me otherwise, knowing full well that he wasn't going into that meeting with an open mind, point blank.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't there to try and understand or learn or listen. He was just there to get us to shut up, which we're not going to do, by the way. Nope. So anybody that's watching right now, if you wouldn't mind, there is his phone number scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Call him up and let him know, hey, I would like to see the Defend the Guard legislation. I'd like to see you support it. I'd like to see you allow it to get to committee, because he's the chair of the Veterans Committee. So he has that ability to be like, hey, we're going to listen to this today, or we're going to do this today. So, set the agenda. But, call him up, let him know what your support is. And, but there's more things coming on this, on the legislation itself. Additionally, we have a rally this weekend, April 5th, right? April 5th at St. Paul in the Rotunda. We're having a Defend the Guard rally. Now, as it turns out, there is an Indivisible Minnesota and a Hands Off Minnesota rally also happening at the Capitol that day, we were organized and on the schedule first. So we were there long before they were, but they are also showing up. And I talked to one of their organizers today because I saw chatter online of people that were going to that rally that were intending on disrupting our rally because they were like, well, it's a Trump rally. No, this is not. We are not Republicans. We are not the Trump party. This is not a pro-Trump rally. And so I got in touch with some of their organizers and explained the situation. And so they're going to try and help, keep the peace. And
great, that's
maybe,
wonderful.
Yeah, maybe well, we'll see what happens, right? Anytime you get a lot of people that have a lot of opinions into a group, you're I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see. We've made some.
Hey,
try to keep it.
No publicity is bad. Whatever. There's no publicity such thing as bad publicity or something like that. No such thing as bad publicity. That's what it is.
I think that a lot of them, if they just stopped to listen to what we were trying to do, that they would probably agree with us. This is the kind of thing that I feel should be bipartisan, should be a lot of peace-loving people that are on all sides of the aisle, or whatever your political sphere is. That this is what we want, is peace, and that's a bipartisan issue. So I think that if people took the time to educate themselves and to listen what we are trying to do, then they would see that we're, at least on this issue, we can be allies.
I believe so. And I think Joey says it best right there. Rises well above party and personality. And I think, and it's the logical way, man. I think the reason why you say, hey, I think they would be sympathetic to our cause, because most people you talk to, other than, I don't know who that commenter is saying it's unconstitutional because it's overreach.
Yeah. Okay. So let's put this up here because this guy's an idiot.
There's a lot of folks that think this. This
is wrong. It's just wrong. It's unconstitutional because it's overreach against present authority under the constitutional powers of activating guard under Section 3 to enforce the laws of the Union. Okay. So, does Article 1 of the Constitution not matter then? Because Article 1 of the Constitution literally gives war powers only to the Congress only. And so you can't say, well, I'm going to say that this is, we're going to take this part of the Constitution out and we're going to apply it here, but then completely ignore other parts. You can't do that. Okay, so you're studying Constitution, but you can't spell studying. So I don't know. Maybe you're in the wrong line to work, because that's
he's probably just getting mad now. But it's
not how it works. The National Guard, while in the states and not mobilized, falls under state jurisdiction, not federal jurisdiction. So I think that if you're going to school for studying constitutional law, you need to keep studying, because you're wrong.
Now wait, there could be other crap, right? Like the Rudy Perpich thing, and they were talking about I know we talked about
Perpich versus Department of Defense that went to the Supreme Court. Yeah. But that gives the federal government authority over the National Guards. But that was only for training. Training purposes only.
Right.
Has absolutely nothing to do about combat. And that's what we're talking about, is activating the National Guard to engage in combat. And in that case, that is an act of war. That is everything else. We're not disputing everything else. What we're disputing is the National Guard going to engage in war without a congressional declaration of war, like the U.S. Constitution says. No, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Keep studying. Those books are, hopefully you didn't pay too much.
Whatever these, well, great. Yeah, I think it's the logical conclusion, and I think it's really some historic stuff. I can't believe that more House members and senators aren't wanting to get on board with this and make history to make America truly I'm not gonna say it. Whatever. It's going to be much better if we don't go into these stupid wars.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people are like, oh no, we should keep doing this. Oh, you know what then? Then you go volunteer your time and go join the military, and then you go overseas and do those wars. And tell me if you don't come home after watching all your friends get blown up in some foreign country where we shouldn't have been for in the first place, where we get absolutely nothing out of it, and no exit strategy, no mission, none of that. And then tell me if you have the same perspective. Get out from behind your book and go volunteer your time.
Yeah. Nope. We're done with that. We're done. And
Yep.
I ain't stopping until we are done.
Yep. And even if, let's say, even hypothetically, and there isn't, but let's say that there is something down the line, that some federal law that, that challenges the Defend the Guard legislation. Let's let the courts figure it out, first of all. But that a federal law that does chip away at the U.S. constitutional powers for Congress to declare war, it needs to be oh shoot, what's the word? It needs to be confronted. We need to take care of it. And that doesn't mean that this law couldn't also be passed. So if you're saying that it's the way that things are going with the military and having wars overseas, that's a justifiable sacrifice, I don't agree. I absolutely do not agree.
I concur, Rebecca, and that's the sad part of the conversations that I have had, where folks seem like, okay, well, they're going to drop bombs over there, so they don't drop them over here. Well, I guess I'm okay with that. Like, God, I don't know what to say to those
people that are just like, oh, well, it's fine. A, you're an idiot, and B, you're a coward, because
right, I believe that.
You go volunteer. If you don't want bombs dropped on you and your service in the military, then don't expect other people to have the, that kind of stuff too. Like, just don't. So I'm getting all tongue-tied right now, but people like this piss me off. So
yeah, don't let them get to you. Well, that was a great hour. I thought we were going to be cutting it short, but we ended up jibber-jabbering for quite a while. That's good.
Like, hey, we're not going to do a podcast. Anyways, it's fine. If you're looking for more information about the Libertarian Party in Minnesota, lpmn.org, become a member, get out and do stuff. We're working against the two-party system, trying to do what we can. The system that we have today, the bureaucracy makes it unsustainable. What are we at? $37 trillion of debt. Can't continue allowing people who have made poor choices to continue making poor choices, because at some point there's going to be
kicking that can up the hill.
Yep. So lpmn.org for more information. Thank you, everybody, for watching this evening. And I guess next week we'll have a little bit of a recap on what happened at the rally. And
yeah, I know I keep saying this and I still end up coming back, but next week I'm going to be gone for sure. I have an adoption appointment next week. So
yeah, so I'll put in the co-host.
All right.
Yep.
Bye,
next
all.
week.